"The night the road cracked like a bad secret, you hear that?" I whispered. "No, my neighbor," replied Wright, before the street let out a sharp, gut-deep croak that echoed like a gunshot. For a split second, I thought a transformer had blown, or maybe a tree had snapped under the weight of frozen snow. Then I saw it, a jagged line ripping through the middle of Willow Bend Court, steam curling out of it like the earth itself was exhaling. A couple of porch lights flicked on. Dogs barked behind fences. Someone yelled, "Was that the road?" as if the alternative was somehow more comforting. And in that strange, icy hush, I felt the hair on the back of my neck rise because I already knew exactly why this had happened. And who was going to pretend it wasn't her fault? 2 hours earlier, the night had been calm. One of those crisp winter evenings where the cold feels clean, like it's polishing the air. But beneath that postcard-perfect layer of snow, a slow disaster had been brewing. It started the moment the HOA president, Marla Jefferson, decided she didn't like the visual disruption of my snow drain path. Mind you, it wasn't illegal. Not unsafe, not intrusive, just visible. And in Marla's eyes, anything visible without her permission was an act of rebellion. Back in November, I had emailed her a simple request: approval to keep the snowmelt channel I'd installed along the side of my driveway. Nothing fancy, just a drainage path leading runoff to the culvert like any sane homeowner would do. She replied with a 4-paragraph manifesto about neighborhood aesthetics and preserving uniformity, which were her favorite phrases when she couldn't find an actual bylaw to stand on. Then, without warning, she sent me a violation notice stating the drain posed long-term risks to community infrastructure. That part is funny in hindsight, because after she forced me to block it off, all that meltwater had nowhere to go except under the weakest part of the street, Cackley, where she insisted it would be harmless. So when the crack tore open that night, I didn't even pretend to be surprised. But my neighbors, they stumbled out in slippers and puffy jackets, mumbling about earthquakes and sinkholes. One guy held his phone up as if the road might explain itself. The light from porches reflected off the ice and made the split look even more dramatic, like a dark lightning bolt frozen in place. And standing in the center of it all, robes cinched tight and fury blooming across her face, was Marla. "What happened?" she demanded, voice sharp and quivering. "You tell us," someone muttered. She ignored that, crouching near the crack as if she were inspecting a body. Steam drifted around her. Her breath fogged the air. She clicked her tongue. "This is definitely due to fluctuating temperatures. Perfectly natural this time of year." I almost laughed. The woman could deny a hurricane if it didn't match her HOA narrative. I kept quiet at first, just watching. My neighbor, Joel, nudged me. "Is this because of the drain thing?" he whispered. "Absolutely," I whispered back. Marla straightened and turned toward all of us. "Everyone, please step back from the damaged area. I'll document the situation for the board. Let's not jump to conclusions." Except the conclusions were already jumping on their own. People exchanged looks. One couple pointed at the blocked drain path along my driveway, still iced over. Still obviously barricaded with the ridiculous HOA-approved stakes she'd forced me to install. The stakes were leaning at weird angles now, like even they felt guilty. I finally stepped forward. "You know the water's been pooling under this section for weeks, right?" Marla's eyes snapped to mine. "Because you diverted it there." "No," I said calmly. "Because you made me block the only proper drainage path I had." "I emailed you about this. Twice." Murmurs from the crowd. A few raised eyebrows. Someone muttered, "Wait, is that true?" Marla's smile tightened so hard I could practically hear enamel grinding. "The board made a decision based on aesthetics and precedents. It has nothing to do with this." "The board?" I asked. "Or you?" For a moment, I thought she might actually hiss. The tension in the air felt electric. The cold bit at my fingers. But my chest burned with that mix of anger and satisfaction you get when the universe finally hands you a little vindication. The crack in the road seemed to glow under the porch lights, stretching wider by the minute. A few pieces of loose asphalt crumbled and slid into the gap, making soft ticking sounds like a countdown. Then, from the far end of the street, a voice called out, "Should we call the city? This looks unsafe." Marla spun toward them. "No, I mean, not yet." The HOA should assess the situation first. She raised her chin in that dramatic queen dash of dash the dash cull dash d dash sack way she had. "We'll need photos, reports, a full evaluation." "Pretty sure the city needs to know the road is literally splitting," someone replied. This time, a few neighbors nodded. Some backed away from Marla altogether. She noticed. Her jaw twitched. That was when she pointed at me, as if naming a suspect in front of a jury. If the road was compromised, it's only because someone altered the natural drainage flow. The HOA acted to maintain order. I crossed my arms and blocked the only outlet for meltwater, which is why the ground keeps freezing, thawing, and refreezing under this spot. Silence. The kind that makes your breath sound too loud. The crack groaned again. A thin piece of asphalt lifted like a loose scab. Marla's face paled. I stepped closer, not to intimidate her, just to make sure every whisper of my next words carried. "Call whoever you want. But you and I both know this isn't a natural crack. This is the HOA's handiwork." A gust of wind blew across the court, cold and sharp, rattling the frost on the trees. And right then, with half the neighborhood watching, another small section of road gave way with a soft crumble. Marla's eyes widened. Mine did too, because I knew this was only the beginning. Marla's meltdown, accusations, emails, and a very angry driveway, this, Marla declared, slapping a paper onto the table, is evidence of willful negligence. I leaned forward, tapped the stack of documents in my lap, and said, "Great, because I brought evidence too." The room went quiet, the way rooms do when everyone knows a fight is about to break out, and they're secretly rooting for the chaos. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, washing the community center in that sickly yellow glow that makes everyone look slightly guilty, even when they're not. Folding chairs screeched against the linoleum as neighbors shifted, trying to get a better view. The smell of burnt coffee from the lobby drifted in, mixing with the distinct scent of cold coats thawing. Marla stood at the front like a royal judge, chin lifted, fingers trembling ever so slightly, whether from cold or ego. It was hard to tell. And me? I sat calmly, because for once I had the paperwork to back me up. The meeting had barely started before she launched her attack. "The board has received multiple complaints," she announced, pacing as she waved a handful of printed emails. Photos. Concerns about drainage violations and irresponsible winter maintenance. Her heels clicked like punctuation marks on the tile. "Our neighborhood's infrastructure has suffered a significant incident, and it is the board's duty to determine whether homeowner actions played a role." By homeowner, she meant me. She didn't even bother pretending otherwise. She slapped down the first photo, a close-up shot of my driveway, the blocked snow drain path awkwardly barricaded by the ugly stakes she'd demanded. "This," she said, "is what happens when a resident decides to alter water flow without authorization." I took a slow breath. "Marla, you're showing them a picture of the drain you forced me to block?" A ripple of murmurs spread through the room. Joel, sitting beside me, whispered, "She really thinks she's got you." I smirked. "She thinks wrong." Marla clicked to the next image, projected onto the wall. It was a zoomed-in shot of a puddle near the curb. She pointed dramatically. "Pooling like this doesn't just happen. It results from an irresponsible modification of property boundaries." Someone in the back muttered, "Isn't that the spot where the road cracked?" Her eye twitched, but she kept going. "Let's stay on topic." She moved into her stack of printed emails. each one dripping with her signature passive-aggressive tone. Here is where I explicitly warned the homeowner about altering drainage paths. Here is where I request corrections. Here is where I stood. And here, I said, sliding my own documents onto the table, loud enough to echo, is where I asked for approval for that exact drain 3 months before you sent any warning. The effect was instant. Heads turned, necks craned. Even the air seemed to hold still. I flipped open the folder. Time-stamped emails. Every one of them. Here's my original request. Here's your response, saying you didn't see the need for a formal review. Here's where you told me aesthetics mattered more than runoff direction. I placed one page front and center. And here's the violation you sent after the first snowfall, claiming the drain was dangerous. A soft gasp came from somewhere near the refreshment table. Marla's face tightened. These emails have been taken out of context. Then read them, I said. Out loud, she didn't move. One of the board members, a quiet woman named Sandra, reached for the documents. It's only fair, she said. We're making decisions based on facts. As Sandra skimmed the pages, the tension thickened. The heater switched on with a hollow thump, but even that didn't break the silence. I could feel the room shifting, like snow sliding off a rooftop just before it crashes down. Then came the soft voice of the city inspector, seated near the front. He'd been invited to provide professional insight, though everyone suspected he was here to keep the HOA from embarrassing itself further. He cleared his throat. For what it's worth, he said, the road damage appears consistent with water accumulation beneath the asphalt. The freeze-thaw cycle can wreak havoc when drainage is obstructed. Marla's eyes snapped to him. Are you implying this is the HOA's fault? He held up his hands. I'm not assigning blame. But if an approved drainage path was altered or required to be altered by HOA directive, then accountability becomes a shared issue. Possibly a financial one. The entire room seemed to inhale at once. A man in the third row whispered, shared, like, we all pay for it. The inspector nodded, potentially. Repair estimates for that type of damage can be significant. Marla's composure cracked just slightly, like the road she refused to acknowledge. Let's not get ahead of ourselves, she said, voice tightening. We don't know all the variables. I leaned back in my chair. Well, one variable we do know is that you made me block that drain. Sandra spoke again, softer this time. Marla, his emails make that clear. Another board member nodded reluctantly. Someone else crossed their arms. A few people shifted their chairs away from Marla without even thinking about it. It was subtle, but it was the first time I'd seen her power actually slip in real time. Her lips thinned. This meeting is spiraling off course. Or, Joel said loudly, it's finally on course. A few laughs escaped the crowd. Not loud, but real. Marla's gaze swept over us, cold and sharp. I will not conduct a meeting where misinformation is being weaponized against the board. I'm reading your exact words, Sandra replied, lifting the emails. How is that misinformation? Marla opened her mouth to retort, but right then, the door to the community center swung open. A man stepped in, face flushed from the cold, holding a folder stamped with the city seal. Sorry to interrupt, he said, scanning the room. I was told to deliver the preliminary repair estimate. Marla froze. He handed the envelope to the inspector. The inspector looked inside, eyebrows rising just a little. Then he announced the number. The reaction was immediate gasps, groans, a couple of outright curses. The kind of price tag that makes wallets flinch and board members sweat. Marla swayed slightly, gripping the back of her chair. I looked at her, and for once, she looked unsure, vulnerable, cornered. But before anyone could ask what would happen next, the lights flickered. Once, twice, then snapped back on. The inspector cleared his throat. We may need to meet again soon. This changes things. And in that moment, as every eye turned toward Marla, She whispered something so quietly I barely heard it. This isn't over. She was right. It wasn't. Freeze, Thaw, and the HOA's icy karma, the homeowner, is fully cleared of all wrongdoing. The inspector read aloud. You could have heard a snowflake hit the carpet after that. People stopped breathing. Marla stopped blinking. Even the humming HVAC system seemed to pause, as if the entire community center wanted a front-row seat to her humiliation. The inspector lowered the paper slowly, almost apologetically, like he knew the sentence he'd just read was the verbal equivalent of a sledgehammer to her authority. Neighbors shifted in their metal chairs, the scrape of legs against linoleum sounding like a restless crowd in an arena. Someone whispered, "Oh, she's done." Another muttered, "We're not paying for her mistake." The air felt charged, sharp with cold frustration and the faint smell of melting snow tracked inside on winter boots. The letter had arrived that morning, delivered in a stiff envelope with the city's seal pressed into a waxy embossing. It looked ominous in a way only official government mail can. The board opened it during the emergency meeting they insisted on holding before anyone else could see it. But word travels fast in neighborhoods like ours. By the time I walked through the double doors of the community center, everyone already knew the number. And the number was catastrophic. Marla tried to keep her posture regal, but her hands gripped her binder so tightly the plastic creaked. "Let's take a deep breath," she said, forcing a smile that stretched just a little too wide. "This is undeniably a challenge. But challenges help us grow stronger as a community." That line landed with the grace of a snowball hitting a brick wall. Joel, sitting next to me, snorted. Growing stronger? My guy? The road split in half. A few neighbors nodded, murmuring agreement. Some people crossed their arms. Others leaned forward, like predators circling prey. Tension pooled in the room, thicker than the winter slush stuck to our shoes. Marla clicked her binder open, as if she could lecture the crowd back into obedience. "The board has always prioritized long-term stability," she said. "We need to focus on unity in times like this." Unity. That was rich. The inspector, who clearly regretted accepting the invitation, stepped forward again. "For clarity," he said, "the cause of the damage was the trapped groundwater under the asphalt. The drain blockage contributed significantly to the freeze-thaw erosion. There it was, the nail, the hammer, the coffin lid." A chorus of low voices erupted behind me. One woman said, "So she caused it." Another man muttered, "And we're footing the bill." Someone else added, "No way. No way in hell." Marla raised her hands. "Please, let's remain civil." But civility had officially left the meeting. I stood slowly, letting the moment breathe. "I think we all understand what happened," I said. I followed the bylaws. I requested approval. I complied with every directive she gave me, even the bad ones. Sandra, the quiet board member, nodded. "The emails make that clear." Marla shot her a look that could have melted ice. I continued. "The drain should never have been blocked. And now we're dealing with the consequences." The inspector nodded. "The repair estimate is accurate. And yes, the HOA will need to cover the full amount." A groan rippled through the room. Actual pain. The kind people feel right behind the eyes when they imagine a giant number suddenly appearing on their next monthly dues statement. Marla took a deep breath, about to attempt another speech. But the crowd was already leaning away from her, emotionally and physically. One man raised his hand. "So, what happens next? Because I'm not paying thousands for a mistake I didn't make." Another chimed in. "We need accountability." A third added, "Maybe new leadership." Marla's eyes widened, darting around the room as if waiting for her loyalists to rise and shield her. But no one moved. Even her usual bobblehead supporters stared at the floor. Then Sandra stood, calm as snowfall. For the record, the board never voted on the drain decision. Marla acted alone. A collective gasp swept through the room. Marla sputtered. "That's not Sandra. It was a procedural oversight." Then the oversight was yours, Sandra said, her voice steady. A few people even clapped before realizing they've done it. And, she added, our bylaws allow a leadership vote when a president acts without board authority. Marla's mouth fell open. She finally understood the room had turned on her. This wasn't about a drain anymore. It was about every petty rule she'd weaponized for years. The meeting dissolved into frantic whispers. Board members clustered together, papers shifting. When Marla tried to join them, Sandra blocked her path. Later, I walked home through falling snow, pulled the ugly stakes from my driveway, and cleared my drain. My phone buzzed. A text from Sandra. Tomorrow's meeting, impeachment vote. Then another, you should probably be there.